Judd, would you call the Vikings contenders?
Or pretenders?
So,
This is kind of a trick question. I'm going to just say it off the top. This is kind of a trick question.
Okay. Contenders for what? A Super Bowl or a playoff spot?
That's why it's a trick question. That is
I would call them contenders for a playoff spot.
Professor Mackloff.
Young Declan Goff, who is on the other side of the glass there and on the ones and twos, as always, he passed me along a column from Mark Sessler, around the NFL writer at NFL.com. And Declan, in the email, said that Mr. Sessler he put the Vikings in the category of contenders. And I was like, wait, what? Because contenders, to me, that means like playoff team that's in the conversation for a Super Bowl. That's the definition that I've always put on contenders, right?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
But then I opened the article, and Declan, like a thorough young producer, included the link to the article so I could go and get the full scope of it and not take things out of context. And these are the categories that Mr. Sessler put teams into. And this is why that term contenders is a little confusing.
Okay.
And it was a bit of a trick question when I threw it at you. He has playoffs or bust. That's one category for the NFC teams. Then he has contenders. Then he has the berserker. And then he has uphill battle to the playoffs.
The what?
The berserker.
Okay.
Basically the wild card. The team that could surprise or shock you.
Okay.
Is that an expression, Declan, that I don't know about?
Yeah, it just means going like the crazy, the wild card, okay.
Berserk. All right. So basically, the best category is the playoffs or bust category, and then he's calling the category below that contenders. Now let me give you the playoffs or bust teams, which these are actually contenders. This is all getting very confusing already, and it's my fault 2 minutes into Score North Live. Playoffs or bust, he has the Saints, the 49ers, Seahawks, and Packers. That's who he has in the playoffs or bust category. Now, here's who he has in the same class as the Minnesota Vikings. The Eagles, the Cowboys, the Buccaneers, the Bears, and the Rams.
Okay.
The Berserker team is the Cardinals, and then uphill battle to the playoffs is the Falcons, Panthers, Lions, Giants, and Redskins. The bad teams. The bad teams in the NFC are the ones that are in the uphill battle to the playoffs. So basically, he's mislabeled the categories. I would call the category that he put the Vikings in fringe playoff contender. Isn't that basically what he's saying there? When he has the playoffs or bust teams in one category, and they are the best teams in the NFC based on what we saw last year and what's happened this offseason, Saints, 49ers, Seahawks, Packers.
So does busts mean if they don't make it?
Then it's a complete failure.
Then, okay.
It's a complete failure of a season if they don't make the playoffs. Is that where you would put the Vikings right now? And as a fringe playoff contender and in the same ilk, the same category as the Eagles, Cowboys, Buccaneers, Bears, and Rams?
I think it's fair. Yeah, it's fair. I guess if I was to parse all of those teams apart a little bit, I might rank them because I don't know that I feel that they're all in the same boat. But I think if you're just going to go with a general label for them, that's fair because with 7 playoff teams now in each conference? I mean, I think the Vikings I think it's very fair to say the expectation for the Vikings in 2020, if the season's played, which I think it will be, is that they are a fringe playoff team.
And that is the other thing there are a few other things that you have to take into account, Judd, because we get in a bubble, we sort of analyze things in a vacuum because we cover Minnesota sports. That's what we do here. Minnesota sports, anytime, anywhere. That's Score North. Check out the app. It's totally free. It's in the Google and Apple Play Store. So when we get in that bubble, I think one thing that you just pointed out, there's an extra playoff spot now, so it's a little bit easier to get into the playoffs. Granted, this full NFL schedule is able to be played when sports get back to normal. But also, you look at what some of the other teams around you have done. You know what I mean? I've made the analogy before of a race. Yes, your pace, your speed matters, but so does the pace and the speed of the guys around you. You know what I mean? You can't just assess what you're doing. And when you look around the league, the Cowboys haven't done a bunch to improve themselves. The Bears are probably slightly improved, mostly at the quarterback position with Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky battling it out. You would think if Nick Foles wins the competition, it's because he's better. And if Trubisky wins the competition, then Foles pushed Trubisky to be a better quarterback. So they should be better at the quarterback position one way or another. And they signed a pretty good defensive end in Robert Quinn, or pass rusher in Robert Quinn from the Cowboys, 30, but he was still one of the more effective pass rushers in the league last year. The Eagles, they went and traded for Darius Slay, so they addressed a major weakness and turned it into a strength. They're a better football team than they were a year ago, but
They got a quarterback.
Carson Wentz still doesn't have anybody to throw the football to. Cowboys, they've sort of stood pat this offseason. They haven't made any major additions that come to mind for me, and they're still working out the Dak Prescott thing. Now, the Buccaneers, the other team in that category with the Vikings, they just added a pretty good quarterback in Tom Brady, or at least a guy who's been a pretty good quarterback.
Right.
But again, Judd, the cliff, the wall, whatever you want to call it, it's got to be somewhere in the future, right?
Absolutely,
Age
yes.
and
We
time
don't know. Yes.
are undefeated. So we don't know necessarily that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are vastly improved as far, well, I guess when you're talking about Jameis Winston and 30 interceptions, they're better at the quarterback position
Yes.
than they were a year ago. How much
But
better?
we don't assume.
How much better is a question, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's unfair to assume that they're getting Tom Brady circa 2010 or something like that. But yes, I think Tampa Bay is going to be good. But I also think it's probably not realistic to say, yeah, it's Tom Brady. No, it's not. It's going to be a guy who has something to prove. But what, during the course of the season, he's going to turn 43. Is that correct, Rami?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, that cliff is there. The question is he at the ledge now or close? I think that when it comes to this conference, there's no team that absolutely scares you. But the flip side with the Vikings is there are, for those of us that watch this team on a regular basis and cover it, there's enough question marks there too, where it certainly would be a mistake to get haughty about the Vikings' chances and say, oh, absolutely. Right?
Yes.
I think that's the fair thing. But I think contender, I think
in this particular
contender
definition of contender.
Yes, I think
Right.
it's fair.
So that's where you would put them.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah. Now, I'd like to see more. My curiosity is this one. A week from today, first round's done. When we are sitting here talking about the first round, possible transactions, blah, 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 do we have, for the first time in a long time, a much better idea of what they are doing and how they perceive themselves? Because the answer might be yes. Is Harris traded? I don't know. Maybe, right? Do they draft a left tackle?
If Harris is traded for more draft picks, then I think they take it. That's another step back, right? When you look at the impact of rookies in this league on average,
it'd be a tip off, yeah.
It's usually not that great. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Even the best rookies. Well, I guess the very best rookies make a major impact.
If they decided, so if they traded him and it became pretty crystal clear, and I'd be slightly surprised, but let's just say Anthony Harris gets traded. And let's just say by the time that we're talking after round one of the draft next week on Friday, and it's become pretty clear that they perceive their best chance to do some rebuilding and tweaking in 2020 and trying to then hit the ground running in 2021. Would you be upset? Because I just want to see the path, and I actually wouldn't be.
You just want clarity.
I want clarity, and I honestly think the more I give this consideration, I really think that if it became clear that their plan was, we got Cousins back, and yes, we plan to try to win with him, but our greater chance is going to come starting in 2021, I think that might be the best play. I really do. I've become, and this might sound weird.
You're punting on a year of Kirk Cousins. When you're paying him you're paying him premium quarterback money. You're punting on a year of Kirk Cousins.
I'm being a fringe contender. I'm being a fringe contender because I will go back to what I said. Nobody in this conference scares me. But let me tell you this one, and I brought this up in Ventline, and I've given this thought. I am actually more comfortable and certain that the Vikings, and this is going to sound weird, that the Vikings have a much better idea of what they're doing right now defensively with the subtractions than I do that they have a really good idea of what they're doing, not schematically, but personnel-wise, offensively. I like this. I like waving goodbye to guys. Maybe
you like
a
what
year
exactly?
Premature. I like the fact that if Griffin comes back, it's totally on your terms, and he might not come back. Rhodes had to go. Waynes, to me, got paid way too much.
Agreed.
I like what they're doing in subtractions because I know that it seems drastic, but I think when it comes to building, not a contender, because this league is filled. The whole purpose, the reason this league exists is to create a perception of contenders.
See, Judd, I feel just the opposite, because when I look at those teams that Mark Sessler of NFL.com puts in the playoff or bust category, the Saints, the 49ers, the Seahawks, and the Packers, none of those are world beaters. None of them are world beaters. And the Seahawks lost one of their best defensive players. The 49ers lost one of their best defensive players. Neither has made major additions to their roster that I can recall at the moment. The Packers have stood pat. The Saints, they added Emmanuel Sanders, so that gives Drew Brees another target to throw to. But none of those teams are so far ahead of the pack that the Vikings went into this should have gone into this offseason thinking punt on 2020. The NFC is there for the taking, man. If anything, you make a run at it.
But it will continue to be because aside from the teams that get great QBs, and there's very few of those, the league is built on not being good. So the conference in 2021 very well is going to look the exact same. Aside from the teams that have the generationally in their prime, by the way, too, so not Tampa Bay, in their prime, great QBs, this league is built on mediocrity and not being good. So the question is, how do you build that team? Everyone can compete. If you are, unless you're Detroit or Cleveland.
So you're take a small step back this year
exactly.
to allow yourself to take a big leap forward next year, and that's when you put the pack behind you, theoretically speaking.
Because what I don't want to do is, I don't think making playoff runs in the National Football League is that great of an idea. I think the great idea is asking one very simple question, which I don't think the Vikings have really tackled since 2009, no pun intended. That's a Super Bowl run. How do I get to a Super Bowl? How do I get to and potentially win one?
So you're not trying to keep up with the pack this year. You're okay falling back a little bit in the pack this year.
Correct.
Because you think that you can make a major push next year and move out ahead of the pack.
Absolutely. Because I think the league is built on, for the most part, not being good.
What you're saying makes sense, Judd. I just have a hard time. I have a hard time waving the white flag in any conference that seems to be there for the taking, and especially in now the first year of a new, essentially 3-year extension that you've given Kirk Cousins with premium quarterback money. You know what I mean? That just doesn't.
I hear you, man.
I'm not saying your plan doesn't make sense. I'm just saying that doesn't sit well with me. When you have a legit shot in 2020 to make noise in what is a, like you said, mediocre conference, and you just invested in the quarterback for 2 years in addition to the one that he already had, that doesn't sit great with me that you're punting on this season in particular. This is a season right here when you look at the conference that is primed with opportunity. You know what I mean? If you're talking about who knows what the Saints or the 49ers or the Seahawks or the Packers do between now and next year. Maybe they get great improvement from within. Maybe they are different teams and better teams than what we see a year from now. I always weigh the known versus the unknown, Judd, and it's important to know what you don't know. And right now, what we know in 2020 is that the NFC is up for grabs. It's there for the taking, because when I go through those teams, none of them jump off the page at you as some kind of juggernaut or a major favorite in the conference. That just doesn't exist. I don't know that that's going to be the case next year. Who's to say that Jimmy Garoppolo doesn't make a major leap forward as a quarterback this year? And we're talking about him as one of the elite quarterbacks in the league next year. I don't think that's totally out of the realm of possibility. When you look at his age, when you look at his winning record, when you look at his resume and the people who have invested and believed in him, very smart, successful football people have done that. You never know when Russell Wilson's going to pull the rabbit out of the hat. You never know when Aaron Rodgers is going to pull the rabbit out of the hat.
That could happen in 2020, though.
You're probably right that none of these teams make a major leap forward next year, and it's maybe even more primed for the taking in 2021, but we don't know that for sure. Who's to say the Eagles don't go and get a big wide receiver and finally let Carson Wentz blossom into the franchise QB that he could be? Who's to say that Mike McCarthy doesn't put it all together in Dallas? Because they have a ton of talent on that roster, and Jason Garrett just seemed to keep finding ways to screw it up. We don't know what's going to happen between now and then. I don't know that the conference is going to be there for the taking in 2021. I know it is in 2020. I know it is. I'm looking at it and I know it.
So